Okay, so get this. You're sending us down this rabbit hole of discourse analysis.
Yeah.
But specifically, like, all about contexts.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, hey, let's peel back the layers of language and see what's really going on.
It's like you've handed us a detective's toolkit.
Right.
The situation, the culture, the power dynamics, all these unseen things are working behind the scenes, shaping how we use and understand language.
Totally. And you've given us 3 awesome articles from the Discourse Analyzer AI toolkit to work with.
Right.
Context and discourse analysis,
Yeah.
the cultural context and discourse analysis, and the political context and discourse analysis.
Yes.
So we're about to uncover how, like, politeness, media spin, even how we talk about climate change, all tie back to these hidden contexts.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
Hold on tight, because things are about to get seriously insightful.
First, though, let's make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay.
What is discourse analysis? It's got to be more than just dissecting sentences, right?
It's like looking at an iceberg. What you see on the surface is just the tip.
Right.
Discourse analysis dives deep, uncovering the hidden meanings, the motivations,
Right.
the social forces that shape what people say and write.
Way more exciting than diagramming sentences, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about becoming a more aware communicator,
Right.
a sharper critical thinker.
Yes.
You start to see how language can be used sometimes, even to manipulate, and you're not so easily fooled.
Okay, so these articles lay out 9 types of context.
9!
Let's take a quick spin through them.
All right, buckle up. First, there's situational context.
Okay.
The immediate scene of the communication crime.
Oh.
Think about it.
Okay.
You wouldn't use the same language texting your best friend as you would in a job interview.
Totally different vibes.
Right. Then there's social context.
Right.
Which is all about the unwritten rules of how we interact based on social norms. You probably wouldn't greet your grandma the same way you greet your buddies, right?
Not unless I wanted to get a serious talking to.
Right.
Okay, what else?
Cultural context.
Okay.
The big picture stuff.
Right.
It's about those shared beliefs, values, and practices of a community.
Got it.
Take the Japanese custom of bowing. In Japan, it's a sign of respect, but in other cultures, it might seem odd.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Culture adds all these layers of meaning that you wouldn't get just from the words themselves.
Absolutely.
What's next?
Historical context.
Okay.
Remember those old-timey movies where people talk all formal-like?
Yeah.
Language changes over time.
Yeah.
Political speeches from the 60s sound so different from today's. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's like language is a living thing, constantly evolving.
Exactly.
Okay, give me another one.
How about institutional context?
Okay.
Each institution, whether it's a courtroom, a hospital, or a school, has its own specific way of using language.
Yeah.
Think about all that legal jargon lawyers throw around.
Okay.
It's a whole different world.
Yeah, good luck understanding any of that without a law degree.
Right.
Okay, so we've got situational, social, cultural, historical, and institutional.
Uh-huh.
What's next in our context tour?
Intertextual context.
Ooh. Okay.
This one's a bit meta.
Okay.
It's about how different texts connect and reference each other.
Got it.
Think about those online articles that are like, study shows this, but other experts disagree.
Yeah.
They're constantly pulling in other sources to build their arguments.
So it's like a web of references adding layers of meaning and credibility.
Right.
Gotcha.
Then we have interactional context.
Okay.
How people use language in real time to manage an interaction.
Uh-huh.
Picture a tense negotiation.
Okay.
The choice of words, the tone of voice, the pauses.
Yeah.
All those things play a role in how the interaction unfolds.
Okay, I'm starting to see the pattern here.
Yeah,
Each context adds a new dimension to how we understand what's being said.
exactly.
What else is there?
Next up, ideological context, the realm of beliefs and values.
Oh, okay.
Think about advertising.
Okay.
It's constantly pushing certain lifestyles or ways of thinking, even if it's not explicitly saying it.
Totally. Like how those perfect family vacation ads
Right.
are actually selling you an idealized version of happiness.
Exactly.
Right.
And finally, we have pragmatic context.
Okay.
This is where things get really interesting.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Because it's about how what we mean can be different from what we literally say.
Oh, I know this one.
Yeah.
Like when someone asks, do you have the time?
Right.
They're not actually asking if you own a clock.
Exactly.
You want to know what time it is.
Right. Context is key.
Yeah.
We're constantly reading between the lines, interpreting not just the words themselves, but also the speaker's intentions and the situation.
Right.
It's fascinating how much we can infer from just a few words.
Okay, so those are our 9 contexts.
Our 9 glorious contexts.
Now, you specifically sent us articles focusing on cultural and political context. Let's dive deeper into those next.
Great. Let's start with cultural context.
Okay.
Think of it this way. Imagine you're traveling to a foreign country where you don't speak the language.
Okay.
You might accidentally offend someone without even realizing it.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're not familiar with their cultural norms.
Oh, I can totally see that happening.
Yeah.
Like accidentally using a gesture that's considered rude in that culture.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cultural context is all about those shared beliefs, values, and practices that shape how we use and understand language.
Got it.
It's what makes communication work smoothly within a particular group.
Yeah.
But it can also create misunderstandings when people from different cultures interact.
All right, so cultural context is about navigating those unspoken rules of communication.
Right.
What about political context? That one sounds kind of intense,
It can be,
Very
but
cool.
it's also incredibly fascinating.
right?
Political context is all about how language is used to gain and maintain power, influence, opinions, and shape the public agenda. We see it all the time in political speeches, news coverage, even in social media debates.
So it's like language becomes a weapon in
Yeah.
the political arena, right?
In a way, yes.
Hmm.
Think about how politicians use certain words or phrases to evoke specific emotions in their audience.
Okay.
They might use words like freedom or security to appeal to people's core values.
Wow.
Or they might use more inflammatory language to stir up anger or fear.
It makes you realize how much power lies in the words we choose.
Uh-huh.
We're not just conveying information. We're also trying to persuade, influence, or even manipulate.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be aware of these political contexts.
Yeah.
Once you start paying attention to how language is being used, you become a more discerning listener and a more critical thinker.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued.
Right.
So we've got these 9 contexts.
Yep.
Like a set of lenses for understanding language.
Yes.
And we're about to take a deep dive into the cultural and political ones.
Yes.
It's going to be good.
You're telling me these contexts are everywhere, shaping our world in ways we often don't even realize.
Oh, wait.
Get ready for some serious aha moments.
Love it. Now, before we get too deep into the theory, I'm curious to see how these contexts play out in the real world.
Yeah.
We've got some fascinating real-world examples lined up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to unpack some major events like the Brexit referendum
Okay.
and the discourse surrounding U.S. immigration policy,
Got it.
showing how these cultural and political contexts were working behind the scenes,
Right.
influencing everything from public opinion to policy decisions.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see how these abstract concepts come to life in these real-world scenarios.
It's going to be good.
Okay, folks, you heard the expert.
Get ready.
Get ready for a wild ride through the world of discourse analysis.
Buckle up.
We're about to uncover the hidden meanings, the power dynamics, and the subtle ways language shapes our reality.
It's like taking the red pill once you see it. You can't unsee it.
And trust me, you won't want to unsee it. This is the kind of knowledge that changes how you see the world.
Absolutely.
We'll be back in part 2 to unpack these real-world examples and see how cultural and political contexts play out in action. Welcome back, Deep Divers. Last time we took a whirlwind tour of the 9 types of context that shape how we use and understand language.
Yeah.
We focused on 2 particularly juicy ones,
Yeah.
cultural and political contexts.
Right.
But here's where things get really interesting.
These contexts don't just exist in a vacuum.
Right.
They're constantly interacting, influencing each other, creating this intricate web of meaning that we're all caught in.
It's like realizing there's this whole hidden dimension to language.
Yeah.
It's not just about the words themselves, it's about all these unseen forces pulling the strings.
Think about it this way. Every time we communicate,
Okay.
we're navigating this complex landscape of cultural norms, historical baggage, and political agendas.
Right?
And being aware of those influences can be a real game changer.
It's like you've given us a secret decoder ring for understanding the world.
I like that.
Okay, so.
Now, remember those real-world examples we touched on earlier?
Yes.
Let's go back to those and really unpack how cultural and political contexts were at play.
Let's start with the Brexit referendum.
Okay.
That was a huge icky event that really divided the UK.
It was.
The article mentioned that immigration was one of the key issues in the debate.
Yeah.
How did cultural and political contexts shape the discourse around that?
The UK, like many countries, has a long and complex history with immigration.
Right.
There are deep-seated anxieties and cultural narratives around national identity and who belongs.
Uh-huh.
These simmering tensions were brought to a boil during the Brexit debate.
So it's like those pre-existing anxieties became fuel for the fire.
Exactly. Both sides of the Brexit campaign tapped into those existing fears and used language to frame immigration in a way that supported their agenda.
Can you give us some specific examples of the language used?
Absolutely. Those advocating for leaving the EU, often referred to as Leave campaigners, frequently used phrases like taking back control and stopping uncontrolled immigration.
Okay.
This language appealed to a sense of nostalgia for a time when Britain had more autonomy and control over its borders,
Right.
implicitly suggesting that immigration was a threat to that sovereignty.
So they were playing on people's emotions.
Yeah.
Their sense of national pride, and maybe even some underlying fears about cultural change.
Exactly. On the other hand, those advocating for remaining in the EU or the Remain campaigners often highlighted the economic benefits of immigration.
Okay.
They talked about immigrants contributing to the workforce, paying taxes, and enriching British culture.
So they were focusing on the positive aspects of immigration, trying to counter those negative narratives.
Precisely. It's fascinating to see how the same issue, immigration, could be framed in such different ways depending on the speaker's political stance and the underlying cultural narratives they were drawing upon.
It really highlights how language can be used strategically to influence public opinion.
Yeah.
It's not just about stating facts. It's about crafting a narrative that resonates with people's values and beliefs.
And that brings us to another crucial point,
Okay.
the role of the media.
Right.
During the Brexit referendum, different media outlets often presented biased coverage, amplifying certain narratives while downplaying others.
Right.
This further contributed to the polarization of the debate.
It's a reminder that we can't just passively consume information,
Yeah.
especially during highly charged political events.
Right.
We need to critically evaluate the source,
Yeah.
consider their biases, and look for evidence to support their claims.
Excellent point. Developing those critical thinking skills is essential in today's world, where we're bombarded with information from all sides.
Okay, so we've seen how cultural and political context played out in the Brexit referendum.
Right.
What about another big issue? Climate change.
Okay.
How does context shape the way we talk about that?
Climate change is fascinating because it's a global issue that requires global cooperation. Yet even the way we talk about it is often influenced by cultural values and political ideologies.
So even though it's a scientific issue,
Yes,
the discourse surrounding it is still shaped by those subjective lenses.
absolutely. Take, for example, the concept of individual responsibility versus collective action.
Okay.
In some cultures, there's a strong emphasis on individual freedom and self-reliance, which might make it harder to embrace the idea of government regulations or collective sacrifices to combat climate change.
While in other cultures, there might be a greater sense of interconnectedness and a belief that we all have a responsibility to care for the planet, which could lead to more support for environmental policies.
Exactly. And then you have the political dimension.
Right.
Some political parties or leaders might downplay the urgency of climate change because it conflicts with their economic interests or their ideological stance on the role of government.
While others might see it as the defining issue of our time and use very strong language to call for immediate action.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, and the way we talk about it is often a reflection of our deeply held values and beliefs.
Okay, so cultural and political contexts are clearly shaping the global conversation around climate change. But how does this play out in everyday life? Can you give us an example of how these contexts might influence something as simple as a conversation between two people?
Let's say you're having a discussion about healthcare with a friend.
Okay.
Even in a seemingly casual conversation, cultural and political contexts can subtly shape the way you both approach the topic.
For example, if you grew up in a country with universal health care, you might have a different perspective than someone who grew up in a country where healthcare is primarily privatized.
Exactly. Your cultural background will influence your assumptions about how healthcare should work, who should be responsible for providing it, and whether it's a right or a privilege.
And then there's the political dimension.
Yeah.
If you identify with a political party that favors government-funded healthcare,
Yeah.
you might use language that emphasizes the importance of universal coverage and social responsibility.
While your friend, who might identify with a party that favors a more market-based approach, might use language that focuses on individual choice and the efficiency of the private sector.
So even in a seemingly simple conversation, Our words are often carrying all this unspoken baggage from our cultural backgrounds and political affiliations.
It's like we're all carrying around these invisible backpacks filled with our experiences, values, and beliefs, and they're constantly influencing how we communicate and interpret the world around us.
Okay, so we've seen how cultural and political contexts play out in big events like the Brexit referendum and everyday conversations.
Yeah.
But what about those 9 other contexts we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Do they also come into play?
Of course. They're all interconnected and constantly influencing each other.
Okay.
For example, during the Brexit debate, the historical context of Britain's relationship with Europe played a huge role.
Right, like centuries of history wars, alliances, all those things were feeding into the current debate.
Exactly. And then you have the institutional context, the way that Parliament functions, the role of the media, the legal framework for holding a referendum. All these things shaped how the debate unfolded.
It's like all these different contexts are layered on top of each other, creating a really complex tapestry of meaning.
And the more aware we are of these contexts, the better equipped we are to understand what's really going on beneath the surface of language.
So we've explored the Brexit referendum, the discourse surrounding climate change, and even everyday conversations, all through the lens of context. What else have you got for us? What other real-world examples can help us really grasp the power of these contexts?
Let's delve into a particularly heated and nuanced area, the discourse surrounding U.S. immigration policy.
Great choice. This is obviously a hot-button issue in the U.S., and the language used to discuss it is often very charged.
It is.
How do cultural and political contexts play into this debate?
First, it's crucial to recognize that the U.S. immigration debate isn't a recent phenomenon.
Okay.
It's been a recurring theme throughout American history, shaping national identity and policy for centuries.
So there's a historical context we need to consider, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That historical context is filled with examples of both welcoming and exclusionary policies.
Okay.
Think about Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty, welcoming millions of immigrants seeking a better life.
Right.
But then you have the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, one of the first significant laws restricting immigration based on race and nationality.
It's a stark reminder that the U.S. has a complex and sometimes contradictory history when it comes to immigration.
Exactly. That historical legacy continues to inform the present-day debate.
Okay.
Now, fast forward to today, and you see that the U.S. immigration debate is often framed in terms of economic impacts and national security.
I've heard those arguments a lot.
Yeah.
Some people argue that immigrants take jobs away from American citizens or strain social services.
Right, and those are often the dominant frames used by those who advocate for stricter immigration policies.
Okay.
They might use language that emphasizes the need for border security, law and order, and protecting American jobs.
While those who support more open immigration policies often highlight the contributions immigrants make to the economy.
Yeah.
They might talk about immigrants filling essential jobs, starting businesses, and enriching American culture.
Precisely. It's the same issue, immigration, but viewed through 2 very different lenses, each shaped by a different set of political priorities and cultural narratives.
It's amazing how language can be used to paint such different pictures of the same reality.
Yeah.
It all depends on what you choose to emphasize and how you frame the issue.
And remember, these frames aren't just about words.
Right.
They're about values.
Okay.
They tap into deeply held beliefs about national identity, economic fairness, and the role of government.
So when we're talking about immigration, we're not just debating policies.
Yeah.
We're also debating who we are as a nation and what we stand for.
It's a profound example of how cultural and political context can shape not only the language we use, but also the entire narrative we construct around a complex issue.
This is getting really deep.
Yeah.
We've unpacked the Brexit referendum, the discourse surrounding climate change, and the complexities of the U.S. immigration debate, all through the lens of context.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see the world in a whole new way.
It's like we've been given this incredible toolkit for understanding how language really works.
Yeah.
We're not just passive consumers of information anymore.
Right.
We're active decoders, peeling back the layers of meaning and uncovering the hidden forces at play.
I'm loving this.
It is fascinating.
But I'm also realizing how much more there is to learn.
Oh, yeah.
We've only just scratched the surface of these complex ideas.
There's always more to uncover.
Right.
Language is a constantly evolving landscape,
Yeah.
and the more we understand about the context that shape it, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the world around us.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive.
We'll be back in part 3 to explore even more fascinating insights into the power of language and how we can use this knowledge to become more effective communicators and more critical thinkers.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the world of discourse analysis. We've been on quite a journey uncovering how cultural and political contexts shape the way we use and understand language.
It's like seeing The Matrix.
It really is. We've gone from defining these abstract concepts to seeing them play out in major world events and even in our everyday conversations.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Exactly. And I've got to say, my brain is buzzing with all these new insights.
Yeah.
But I'm left with one big question.
Okay.
We've talked about how context can be used to manipulate or mislead, but can it also be used for good?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's the exciting part.
Okay.
Awareness of these contexts isn't just about deconstructing manipulative messages. It's also about constructing powerful ones.
Right.
We can use this knowledge to communicate more effectively, bridge divides, and advocate for the causes we care about.
So it's not just about being a critical consumer of information.
Right.
It's also about being a more responsible and effective communicator.
Exactly.
Okay.
Think about social justice movements, for example.
Yeah.
They're masters at using language to challenge the status quo and shift public opinion.
Right. Yeah.
They understand that it's not enough to just have the facts on your side. You need to frame your message in a way that resonates with people's values and emotions.
Like the #MeToo movement, for instance.
Yes.
They completely changed the conversation around sexual harassment and assault,
Right.
using powerful personal stories and compelling language to create a sense of solidarity and demand accountability.
Exactly. They tapped into the cultural context of gender inequality and the power dynamics that often silence victims. And they used language that resonated deeply with women who had experienced similar situations.
Right.
It was a game changer.
It's inspiring to see how language can be such a powerful force for social change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not just limited to these large-scale movements.
Yep.
We can use this knowledge in our own lives, too.
Absolutely.
Understanding cultural differences, for instance, can help us navigate intercultural communication more smoothly, building bridges of understanding and empathy.
Totally.
So instead of accidentally putting my foot in my mouth when I'm talking to someone from a different culture,
Right.
I can use my awareness of their cultural norms to communicate more respectfully and avoid misunderstandings.
Exactly.
That's super helpful.
It's about recognizing that even seemingly small things like the words we choose or the tone of voice we use can have a big impact on how our message is received.
Okay, so we can use this understanding of context to become more persuasive communicators and bridge cultural divides.
Yeah.
What else? How can we use it to advocate for positive change?
Oh, think about any issue you care deeply about.
Okay.
Climate change, social justice, animal welfare, anything.
Yeah.
Understanding the cultural and political landscape surrounding that issue is crucial for crafting effective arguments and mobilizing support.
So instead of just preaching to the choir,
Right.
I need to figure out how to frame my message in a way that resonates with people who might not already agree with me.
Exactly. You need to understand their values, their concerns, and the cultural narratives that might be shaping their views.
Right.
Then you can tailor your language and your arguments in a way that speaks directly to their hearts and minds.
This is making me think about all the heated debates I see on social media.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's just yelling at each other and no one's really listening.
Yeah.
Maybe if we all had a better understanding of context,
Yeah.
those conversations could be more productive.
I think you're onto something. Imagine a world where people approached online discussions with more empathy, curiosity, and a genuine desire to understand the other person's perspective.
Right.
It wouldn't solve all our problems, but it would certainly be a step in the right direction.
It makes me realize that this whole deep dive into discourse analysis hasn't just been about dissecting language.
Yeah.
It's also been about rediscovering the power of human connection.
Yeah.
It's about using language to build bridges instead of walls.
Beautifully said. At the end of the day, language is our most powerful tool for connecting with others, sharing ideas, and creating change.
Right?
And the more we understand how it works, the more effectively we can wield that power.
This has been an incredible journey. I feel like we've peeled back the layers of language, revealing all these hidden forces that shape our world.
I agree.
What's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I would say this: embrace the power of language, but wield it responsibly.
Okay.
Be aware of the contexts that shape your communication and use that awareness to connect, to persuade, and to make a positive impact on the world.
That's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
It's not just about analyzing language. It's about using it to create a better world.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that language is more than just words. It's a force that can shape our thoughts, our actions, and our collective future.
Well, folks, there you have it. A deep dive into the fascinating world of discourse analysis.
That's right.
We've explored the hidden forces, that shape language, the ways it can be used and abused, and ultimately its power to connect us and create positive change.
It's been a great journey.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.